You're listening to the Superman Super Show, episode number 35, The Economic Enemy. Hello and welcome to the Superman Super Show. I'm a host. My name is Steeven, and 1,000 miles over there to my right is another host, Mr. Ed Moore.
Howdy.
Happy New Year, Ed.
Not yet. It's the same one that we've been using. Yeah. It's not a new one yet.
Not as we are recording this. We're recording this on November the 29th, but this episode will go out on January 2nd.
Oh, my fault. That was a behind the curtain deal.
Right.
There. Oh, I'm sorry. I let him look. Oh,
Happy New Year. If I had one of those little horns on. Yeah. So, boy, was that New Year's crazy, that party. Can't believe that happened that night.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
It's 2023 already. Whew.
Good.
Where am I?
I mean, everybody thought Y2K was going to happen on the year 2000. Who'd have thought 22 to 23 we'd get Y2K? That's just the way things are. Everything's late when it comes to computers. Hey, I have some more podcast recommendations I'd like to do.
All right, let's hear it.
I'm tentatively calling this Steeven's Super Suggestions.
Ooh.
Anybody?
All right.
What do you think?
Steeven, that's not bad.
So here's what I've decided to do. I want to try to recommend a podcast every episode, and rather than try to make a list of who's better and who's not and blah 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 and offend anybody, before we sat down, I looked at my queue and I looked at which 4 episodes were coming up, and so the first one. So the one I'm going to talk about on this episode is a show called Meanwhile at the Podcast.
Okay.
And I'll give you their description. Meanwhile at the Podcast is a show about pop culture, entertainment, and fandom. Your hosts, George, formerly the George and Tony Entertainment Show. Rodney, the artist, otherwise known as Art Nerd. There's 2 R's in nerd. Kristen and Rich, the married team Supreme, formerly of Comic Logic Books and Artwork. They share opinions and comments about movies, TV, comics, prose, music, theater, and the creative arts, along with relatable slice of life anecdotes. So yeah, if you're somebody who likes an ensemble type of podcast, more than 2 hosts, and you like a lot of, they do have a lot of personal stories. They talk about their life, their individual lives a lot and whatnot. And if you like that stuff, this is the show for you. All the hosts are like super nice. They're just super nice people. And it's a clean podcast. There's none of the swearing that the kids these days do. So not that I'm offended by any of that, but for some people that's a plus.
Cool.
Meanwhile at the Podcast, I think they're up to I think they're getting close to their 200th episode.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, you're getting up there. I ran into them through Twitter. That was a Twitter find. I think I was seeing. I don't know. Maybe you had even retweeted one of their tweets or something. Maybe. I don't remember how it popped up, but I thought, oh, this sounds kind of fun. I'll give them a listen. So, Meanwhile at the Podcast, and I like that name. I think that's it. That's a cool name.
That's pretty clever.
They actually, when I did had a bunch of people like you, Ed, guest host an episode of Just Another Fanboy.
Mm-hmm.
They did an episode where they did a dramatic reading. It was like an audio drama of a really old romance comic. It was really kind of fun.
Yikes,
It was really fun. They had the sound effects and the organ music and everything. It's some good stuff. Y'all should find it. All right. So today we are here to talk about The Economic Enemy. This is the 3rd story that appeared in Superman number 4. Written by Jerry Siegel, pencils by Joe Shuster, inks by Paul Cassaday. Superman number 4 has a cover date of spring 1940, though according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, it had an on sale date of February 15th, 1940. Let me tell you what happened. This is a synopsis, comes from Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Clark Kent visits the home of Paul Dorgan, a sociologist who believes someone is trying to prevent America's return to prosperity. Dorgan is murdered, so Superman returns to his home to look for clues. He runs across some burglars from whom he gets information. They work for Barney Calhoun and are sabotaging several industries. Superman prevents several calamities and traces the destruction back to Calhoun. The gang leader reveals he works for J.F. Curtis, a man with foreign interests in mind. The Man of Steel brings Calhoun to Curtis, who executes his former partner. Curtis then tries to electrocute Superman, but he is unaffected. However, Superman touches his opponent, and the electricity is transferred to Curtis, killing him. Ed, what'd you think?
I miss super villains now that we've had a taste of them.
Yeah.
But I will say that this actually is the start of a run of who knows how long of the non-supervillain bad guys again.
Yep.
So they, I don't know, experimented with the Ultrahumanite and Lex Luthor, and I guess they, put them up on the shelf. They didn't want to wear them out. I kind of wish contemporary comic publishers would do those sorts of things, but they refuse to do that. If it's popular, they'll hammer that puppy, or milk that puppy, or however you want to look at it. So, but this one, I think this one in particular. Now, it could be because we're coming off of of several series of actual supervillains, but this one just had a really different kind of feel to it, such that it even made me wonder if Siegel actually wrote this.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very different in feel to me.
Yeah, I agree. It was, and the next few had almost not all four of them that we're going to talk about tonight, but there was something a little bit different from a couple of these as I was reading them, and there were moments. And this one in particular, there's a good example, especially when we get to the end, when he electrocutes the guy. There's just moments that stuff happens that at first I just have no idea how they got from the one situation to the other. Mm-hmm. And they don't do, there's not, this is the era where they over-explain everything, where despite the fact that the picture is showing you that Superman is eating a cheeseburger, they'll have a narration box saying, and Superman ate a cheeseburger.
Right.
And yet there were a couple of moments that just something would happen. And I mean, the electricity thing, I'll use that as an example. When the guy, this is near the end, I'm looking at it right now. So Superman comes in with this dude under his arm, hands him over to the other guy, and the other guy just reaches out and suddenly he's holding a lever. We don't know what the lever goes to. We never see any kind of machine. It's just a lever that's going off panel. And apparently he's just holding on to it, but we're assuming he moved it up or down. And then electricity, we don't know where it's coming from. Is it coming from the floor? Is it shooting out of something? Don't know. It just suddenly, the other guy dies. Electricity just shoots through him. And so then he tries it again on Superman, and Superman just standing there with his arms crossed and the electricity's coursing through him. And then, but for some reason, the electricity stays within Superman, kind of like static electricity, and he's able to just reach out, like he shuffled his feet across the carpeted floor and reached out and touched the guy. It's just, I don't know. I think it gets worse in a different story as far as things that happen with little to no explanation. So you don't know how they got to certain situations. But that one was just, I don't know. I was really confused at first because he's just holding to me, it looked like he was holding a stick. Just had the stick happened to go off panel. But, I don't know. I on the one hand, I was also, like, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I noticed that all of these stories I think that we read for tonight are 8-panel pages, almost exclusively.
Yeah. This, I'm assuming this issue of Superman, because the previous issues of Superman were made up by comic strips that they had put into the book, and then, or reprints of Action Comics. I don't remember if you said in the previous episodes, are any of these from Superman #4 a comic strip? I don't know if this is all new stuff now going forward.
These two were not. Let me look back. I didn't make a note that they were, so I don't think I saw that they were.
I assumed they weren't because of the 8-panel grid and because the panels are wider. They're not square. The others were always square. When it was a comic strip, they were more square.
Right.
And I only notice that when I'm grabbing screenshots of panels to use in the artwork for the site.
Oh, okay.
But because depending on what I'm using, sometimes the squares work best and sometimes the rectangles work best. But
right.
Yeah, there's a guy in here who looks like Dick Tracy. He's like in there for one panel. But that's only because of the yellow suit and the yellow hat. You can't help but think of Dick Tracy there. A lot of death in this issue.
There's a lot of death in all of these stories, and a much more outwardly ultra right Superman. Right being conservative as opposed to ultra right. Just in his, if not in his attitude, then just outright in his verbiage that he uses towards people and about situations and things. And I'm like, well, he has kind of been, trending on the more conservative side of things politically.
Yeah.
But it just seemed really obvious to me in this batch that we read that he was like just really hardcore. Oh, you jaywalked? Die. It's like, oh, easy, dog. I mean, he broke the law, it's just wow. It's
a very strange transition, I think, to go from the Ultra Humanite to Lex Luthor, then back to this. People are trying to destroy the manufacturing industry or something,
right. Just higher levels of grifters in essence is all that they are.
Yeah, yeah, and I got to thinking about that at one point today. I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about the Death of Superman 30th anniversary issue that came out in January. I think it was Raging Bullets. And there's a short story in there where Ma and Pa Kent, it's set during the fight between Doomsday and Superman, but Ma and Pa Kent are watching it on TV and they're talking about all the things that Superman has done for their fellow man. And one of the things they talk about is that apparently Superman had been for a number of years helping with medical couriers, getting hearts to hospitals and making sure that, and I remember Jim and Sean were talking about that and they were like, here, this is the stuff you don't see about Superman anymore. It's always he's fighting a galactic menace or a super powerful bad guy. And it's like, it's and they were like, and this is the kind of stuff we want to see from Superman every once in a while. And it's like, that's all it is anymore with Superman. And this is a character who in his roots, he's the champion of the oppressed. He was there to fight for the little guy. That was his deal for a while here. And so going back to these stories, it's like, all right, well, I get it because that's who he is. But at the same time, I sure as heck dig him fighting robots in a lair made from a volcanic crater.
Sure. Absolutely. But I mean, it's, whenever you hear, let me rephrase that. Whenever I hear the comic book podcasts that I listen to talk about what they're tired of, talk about fatigue, it's always a vent.
Yeah.
The big, but that's not the only fatigue that there is. I mean, I can't count the number of times that I have heard a fan talk about comic books and something come up about their writing in that, well, they're trying to make their mark. And I think that's a lot of what now, the way that it's looked at, well, now it's even spoiled more because of the big screen and small screen adaptations. And that's what people ultimately want because that's where the money is. With these that we're talking about now, Steven, there was absolutely nothing in these people's mind that they were going to make a true living off of this. That was not what they were doing. They weren't waiting for the big one to come in, or they had 2 or 3 jobs on top of this. You read biography of any writer or artist of the golden age into the silver age, and they always had at least 2 jobs, whatever they're doing with comic book and something else. Either they were working for the commercial art industry, if they're an artist, or if they're a writer, they were doing novels and they were writing TV scripts. And, not related to the comic book properties. These were, comedies and stuff like that were on TV.
Yeah.
That's more in the Silver Age than the Golden Age, of course. But I'm just, there are so many they always do's that fatigue me. And one of those is it's always got to be this ultimate threat. It's so big. The world, the universe, all of time will disappear.
Yeah.
And this is so refreshing in its way because, no, man, it's just some thugs that are wanting to make some money and, they're going to get the Teamsters on their side and they're going to wreck this train from delivering this food and they're going to, all that. And that's bad, but that's it. It's not this thing where the world's going to stop spinning and science is going to go crazy. And it's like, nah, they're just wanting to make some bucks, man.
Yeah, I found that these days, as a crotchety old fanboy like I am, when it comes to superhero stories, because that's primarily what we're talking about here. There's a different kind of writing when we're talking about other types of stories, but with the superhero stories, the books that I tend to drift toward and enjoy are those that still do a good job of combining the character's superhero presence with just their everyday personal life. Right. There's just something about seeing frickin' Nightwing hanging out in his apartment with Barbara Gordon and his three-legged dog eating pizza.
Yep.
And yet there's other writers who they get on a book and it's like, all right, so I have this idea for these 3 6-issue arcs that are going to lead into the next event. And it's going to change the landscape forever. And then when that's done, it's going to lead to the next thing that's even bigger and the bigger changes. And it's just like every panel of every book that they're writing is there to get them to the next big event. And there's no quiet moments, Right. And I think a good writer is just damn good at combining those big, epic superhero battle moments with just these small, quiet moments that make you realize that these are actual people, And if I don't feel like it's a real person, then it just doesn't do anything for me.
The softball, baseball games that the X-Men used to have, and the Rutland, Vermont Halloween parades that the whole Marvel universe used to have. Avengers did it, Defenders did it, some things like that. That has nothing to do with Thanos wanting to kill half of all living creatures. No, it's just this moment. That's all it is.
In the 80s, many of the fights that Spider-Man would get into with a villain is because Peter Parker has gone to Empire State University to find out why his tuition check has bounced, or he's pursuing something about his personal life and happens to cross paths with a freaking mongoose themed villain who is extorting a teacher or robbing a bank next door or something like that. And I often sing the praises of Tom Taylor, and I think one of the things he does really well is put in those human moments for me with those characters that just make me feel like they're more than just this analog for power. They're actual people trying to do something,
And I do feel that I also have to say, as an X-Men fan, that the Hellfire Gala is not the quiet moments that I'm after. Okay, that's not the kind of thing that I want to see. I don't like that either, but that's for whole other reasons. Several instances too I've noticed in our batch of stories, and this one in particular, Superman gets shot. They try to shoot him. That hasn't happened a whole lot, but now it seems to be picking up.
Yeah.
There's also seems to be this whole set of bad guys that don't even know who Superman is, and I don't understand how that's possible at this time.
At this point. Yeah, there's it's not, I don't think it's this one. It's one of the others, but there's a moment where he's actually identified somebody's, who are you? And that's Superman. What? I thought he was a myth, And I mean, I get it, but it's the same thing when I would read a Marvel comic in the 80s and somebody would go, a superhero would just encounter some regular person and they'd be like, well, what you doing walking around in your PJs? And it's like, you live in New York City in the 80s in the Marvel universe. You cannot tell me you've never encountered a superhero before.
A superhero. Yeah. You don't have to know this one's name, but you recognize that that's why they're dressed at the very least like that. It's not a Halloween, Valentine Day thing. It's
silliness. But this one, it was all right. I mean, it's just your standard Superman story from this time. There's nothing super exciting about it. There's nothing that they're not doing anything different.
This one, I think, would have made a pretty solid radio script, as we have interacted with the radio show on and off, and the host of a podcast. I don't think he's with us tonight, but this is just one of those that is just very understandable by the vast majority of the people. No big super science. There's a bad guy. He's messing with our economy. Well, everybody knows about that because that means prices are going to go up and things won't be available. Oh, kind of like when you're in a pandemic. It's Anyways, don't know
what that's like.
Yeah, anything about that. I read about that once. It's So it seemed very, and I'm going to use this word, and I don't mean it in a bad way. I just can't think of a better word. But the story was a very pedestrian Superman.
That was the same word I was thinking of.
And I know that is intended to be a negative, the way it's typically used. Right. But that's not what I mean. I don't mean it in any kind of pejorative sense. I mean it as a not the opposite of that, whatever word you would want to use for the opposite of that, with grandiose superheroes, potentially Superman going out into space, or at least, well, he doesn't fly yet, but at least jumping around more or things like that. This was very down, rushing between buildings in the city, talking to different people, beating feet to get the info that he needed. There was no spy. There was nothing war or World War II or any of that. It was just very, very small, insular kind of world that he was dealing with, or part of the world anyways.
Yeah. And again, it's Superman at this time. Again, he's supposed to be the people's hero. He's the champion of the oppressed. And so on the one hand, you can see the people that live in Metropolis. You could almost understand them saying to somebody like Superman, yeah, it's great. You stopped an alien invasion. We appreciate that. You saved our lives. But at the same time, I can't make rent because they're shutting down these factories and whatnot because they're trying to price gouge. And is that something, that's something you're supposed to be helping us with, Superman? It's like,
right.
So it's all, the writers at this time, I'm not trying to sound negative, but aren't as sophisticated as the writers, the writing that we have now.
Right.
So this kind of story would be their quieter moments.
Right.
And it makes the stories like the last one we had with the Ultrahumanite just that much more exciting. The problem comes is when the publishers start realizing that those big stories with the Ultrahumanite are, the big sellers. And so they're like, make every story like that.
Right.
And then they're not as special.
Then you start getting the supervillain of the month. And, it gets to be formulaic, which is in some ways gotten us to where we are now. Doug, I read a lot of out of continuity books as well. And allow me to say, sir, there is never a bad reason to read more indie books.
Yeah.
There's, Marvel and DC have their place, and I read, I read far more Marvel than I do DC, but this coming calendar year, I'm going to change that. But there's just, if you just look a little bit, there's such a wider breadth of topics in indie books than you're going to find right now in Marvel and DC. Yep. So that's, I'm not going to put down anybody's liking of those, because you like what you like, and that's cool.
Yeah, but even with the Marvel and the DC, what he's Doug is saying there in the comments about reading more out of continuity. Some of my favorite superhero books from the big two right now are those that are not part of the main universe, be it Deceased over at DC or, Human Target over at DC, because they're out of continuity, there is a sense of this character may not make it to the end. You could kill Batman, and I mean, heck, they did that in Deceased. He was one of the first characters to go. Right. And so there is a sense of, you have that fear. Oh my gosh, somebody's going to die. Whereas you read a normal Batman book, and if Batman's going to win, he's going to win.
He'll be back ultimately. But, maybe in the short term, no, but ultimately he will. Much as a storyline that you're currently talking about on another show. It's like, but come on. Did we really think at the time that they were going to off their milk cow?
Some people did. But it's that was the whole point of that story, though, was it's not despite the fact that it's called The Death of Superman, that's not something that should have surprised anybody. It's how we deal with the aftermath and how he's going to come back. That's what that story was about. But I like to compare the big events and the big stories that just come all the time. This is how I like to compare them. I used to work with a guy who could bake all kinds of great treats. And I looked forward to Christmas every year because he would make these Oreo balls. Have you ever had these Oreo balls?
Yes, sir, I have.
The ground up Oreo with the cream cheese and it's so good.
I currently live with a young lady that can make a couple different varieties of those.
And so every Christmas I'm like, oh my, I can't wait for those Oreo balls. And one Christmas he said, they're not that hard to make. You could make them yourself. And I said, look, if I learned how to make these myself, I'd make them all the time.
Right.
And then I'd get sick of them. Exactly.
They wouldn't be special.
Then they wouldn't be special. I'd get sick of them and I wouldn't eat them anymore. So, you need stories like this one here in Superman 4 because it was still a fun story.
Oh, sure.
Don't get me wrong. It's not like, I got to slog through these types of stories to get to the fun stuff. No, it's still a fun story. Nothing was about character progression back then. So we're not progressing anything, but still, it's just a fun yarn. Some of them are going to be big earth-shattering yarns, and some of them just aren't going to be. The point is just to have fun with it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything else you want to say about this story?
Go out and read it, folks.
All right. Yeah, get out there. We are reading these. I like to bring this up every now and again. Ed and I are reading these through the Superman and the Golden Age collections that you can get through DC.
It's the omnibus. It's not. Yeah. Not just the Golden Age, there's 3 or 4 different volumes of Golden Age stuff, but these are the omnibuy that we're reading these out of.
And, if you're a digital comics reader, this is the best time to be picking up stuff from Comixology because some of the best sales are around this time, whether it's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or just general holiday sales. Yeah. So all of their sales over there it's a rule that they have to be at least a week long. And so I picked up a number of these, a couple more volumes of this, and I got some of the Batman Golden Age ones as well.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
I read some more Batman this weekend for the podcast. I'm keeping up with
digging into those. And I bought a big stack of new Teen Titans trades, the Marv Wolfman, George Perez, because they were like $2 a piece.
Let me ask a question. Mm-hmm. Right before you said that, you looked over your shoulder. Is that something you're not supposed to have done?
No.
Steven?
I was trying to be conspiratorial.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, uh-oh.
No.
Steven's buying books.
Nah, she knows.
Okay.
All right, let's wrap this sucker up.
Let's do it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of the Superman Super Show, and this episode only.
Right.
That's the only thing I'm thanking you for.
Thank
you.
You
want to drop us
a
line, ask us a question, or, just email us, the Superman Super Show @gmail.com. I have to start making a point to look in the spam folder every now and again.
Because we're getting so many emails that we have to make sure that we catch them.
No, but the last time we recorded, the host of the Radio Superman show said he had sent me something for one of my other shows, and I had never got it. It was in my spam folder for almost a month. So yeah. And if you don't check them, it automatically deletes them after like 45 days.
Was his what was on the most recent episode?
Yep.
Okay.
That was the one, yeah.
I listened to that one today after
It made me laugh.
Resumed my break from vacation listening.
Yeah.
Or unlistening, as it were.
You can also find us over on Twitter under the handle @Soups Super Show. You can also come join in on all the fun at the forum, forum.justanotherfanboy.com. All of the links will be in the show notes. And so until next week, folks, I'm Steven and that's Ed. And this was the Superman Super Show. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. It is no longer saying the chow. You changed it up on me.
Ciao, Bella.
Superman is a copyrighted feature appearing in Action Comics magazine.